Hello again, YouTube. This is Peter with you once again, here with my long-awaited follow-up about the election and what went wrong. However, instead of talking about why Hillary Clinton lost, which is a subject that has been analyzed to death, I want to talk about a related subject, which is why progressives lost. Now, I think that a fellow YouTuber on Facebook concisely summarized it very well when he said that Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. And that line to me concisely summarizes it because from my perspective, there are many people within the progressive movement who are essentially the fair-weathered friends of the Democratic Party. They'll show up and support the party when they feel the burn or when they've joined the hope train. But when they don't have that euphoric sense that their high-minded ideals are being catered to, then their support falls away, which, as we can see, causes Democrats the election. And this is not only a problem in terms of presidential elections, we can see this as well at the level of state politics and local politics, where the Democratic Party is in decline as they lose more and more governorships and state legislators. And as I see it, one of the main reasons for this is that progressives and liberals are really bad at electoral politics. Compared to the right, they don't get involved nearly as much, they are not nearly as reliable, and they're not engaging on multiple levels. If a messiah figure like Bernie Sanders, or for some people Barack Obama, comes along, then they feel the burn, join the hope train, and they're fired up, and they're ready to go vote. But when it comes to the midterm elections, when it comes to local elections, they don't work as hard to win as Republicans do. And as I've heard people talk about the reasons that Hillary Clinton lost, there is this narrative amongst the left that if only the Democrats would turn more progressive. All right, fair enough. But here's the thing. First of all, a lot of these progressives and liberals regard the Democratic Party not as something that they are intrinsically a part of and have some hand in shaping, but as an external force which can either cater to them or turn their backs on them. The Democratic Party to them is some sort of other. Now at this point, I want you all to watch a video that I've linked called The Case Against Liberal Despair. The speaker in the video is Michelle Goldberg. And I rarely do this, but I really want you to stop this video, go to that video, watch it, and then come back to this video. Okay? Alright, you haven't watched the video, have you? Okay, let me just summarize it for you. But really, watch the video. In the video, Michelle Goldberg, who I became familiar with from her book Kingdom Coming, which is about evangelical Christianity, talks about how liberals in Occupy Wall Street, disillusioned with Obama, were talking about turning their back on electoral politics. And she uses the example of the religious right to counter this idea of giving up on democratic politics by saying that politics does not just work when you show up to an election every 4 years, that you have to engage on multiple levels in order to steer the party in your direction. But no, seriously, go watch the video, please. I think it makes a very important point. And bear in mind that this was in 2012, long before anything with Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders. And speaking of Occupy Wall Street, I think there's an interesting difference going back to that Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line statement that I talked about earlier. When you compare Occupy Wall Street to the Tea Party, as astroturfed as it was, I think you see quite clearly this contrast between progressives and liberals and leftists versus conservatives. So during Occupy Wall Street, in the early period, Democratic leaders saw this populist protest movement and they reached out their hand and said, "We're the Democratic Party. How can we work with you?" And the attitude amongst many people within Occupy Wall Street was to slap that hand away and say, "The revolution will not sell out to the corporate party Democrats." To which the Democrats said, "All right then." And then they turned around to the police officers and they said, "All right, tear gas these hippies." And Occupy Wall Street fizzled out. Maybe there were a few people who were elected into office on the basis of Occupy Wall Street, but it is nowhere near as successful as the Tea Party, because when the Republicans showed up to the Tea Party and said, "We're the Republican Party, how may we work with you?" the Tea Party said, "Great, who can we elect into office for you?" Now, of course, this shook up the Republican establishment a bit, but it effectively elected people into office and changed the direction of the Republican Party. AstroTurfed or not, it was a far more successful grassroots movement because it demonstrates that difference in mentality of falling in love versus falling in line. And I feel that in my life, the progressive and liberal and far left people that I've known can be so up their own ass with high-minded ideals that the idea of doing the hard work necessary to change the political party, it's just, no, they can't be bothered. Either this external entity known as the Democratic Party, who they believe is just a bunch of sellouts anyway, is going to give them their way, or they're going to throw up their hands and be like, "I'm not going to vote for you, I'm not going to help you." They want to stand on the sidelines and complain, and a lot of them fall into the rationale that the Republicans and Democrats are just two sides of the same coin. Well, if you're hoping for a party to abolish capitalism, sure, I guess the Republicans and the Democrats are exactly the same, or more or less the same. But if you're one of those people who pays attention to the nuances and the differences in public policy, then you'll see that they're quite different, and that it actually does matter whether or not a Democrat or a Republican is elected to the presidency, whether there's a Democratic Congress or a Republican Congress. But that's just the details of public policy. It's either you are as radical as we want you to be, or you're just sellout corporate shills. There is a all or nothing mentality, which I'm sorry to tell you, is self-defeating. Do you like Donald Trump? Because this is how we get Donald Trump. And to be perfectly honest, when I saw the campaign of Bernie Sanders, I also think this typifies what I'm talking about. Bear in mind that Bernie Sanders was not even a Democrat until relatively recently. And although he did get a large amount of support from mainstream Democrats, obviously not enough to win the nomination, a lot of the support that he received was from fair-weathered liberals who decided that suddenly they're members of the Democratic Party because a candidate they like is running, whereas before their support was tentative at best. It's sort of like if you're getting married and you have these fair-weathered friends who suddenly show up and are indignant that you didn't invite them to your wedding, and then not only do they insist on being invited to your wedding, but they want to plan the wedding, and they want to choose who you marry. That's a lot of these progressives and liberals, many of whom supported Bernie Sanders. I know this will go down like a bitter, jagged pill to many of you, but if you couldn't care less about the Democratic Party before Bernie Sanders showed up, if you see it as something separate from yourself, that you're not a member of, that you're not a part of, that can only choose to cater to your whims or turn its back on you, then you're kind of part of the problem, because it's really naive to expect that a big political machine is suddenly going to cater to people whose support is tentative at best. It's fair-weathered friends, all right? The Democratic Party and any political party is not going to cater to a fair-weathered group of people who can't be bothered to support them and vote for them unless they're properly enthused by their Messiah candidate. And this also happens on the right. There was a video on The Breakfast Club by Wayne Whatley, and he was talking about being for Ron Paul and actually showing up as a delegate at his state Republican convention, and the resistance that the Ron Paul supporters met from the regular Republican establishment in his state. And again, here's an example of people who are otherwise not really engaged with party politics, running against established people who have devoted themselves to working for the party, working within the party, and you have these people, these Ron Paul supporters, who just show up and think that they're going to have things their way. That's just not the way these things work. If progressives want the Democratic Party to move in a more progressive direction, they are going to have to stop sitting on the sidelines. They are going to, like the religious right did, have to embed themselves within the Democratic Party to take over the Democratic Party and steer it in the direction that they want. Failing to do that, if they continue to be fair-weathered outsiders, as they have been, not only will Democrats continue to lose when they don't select the right candidate that people fall in love with, but the party will not move in a progressive direction. So moving the Democratic Party in a more progressive direction is going to take a lot of hard work over years, and it's not something that just happens when the candidate progressives love runs for president. It happens in the years before that, in the midterm elections, in state and local elections. And again, Republicans have proven themselves far better at this game than progressives and Democrats. So for the time being, I'm going to end my little rant, and bear in mind that my thoughts are a bit more complicated than I'm making them out to be right now. Of course, it's difficult to quantify and categorize all the different people who are generally considered on the left, or Democrats, liberals, progressives, and how exactly they acted. So there's lots of nuances in this discussion, but I think the overall themes that I'm talking about here can be borne out not only anecdotally, but simply through results. And I think this election shows that. So the next time you want to talk about how the Democratic Party screwed Bernie Sanders out of the nomination, or the Democratic Party this or the Democratic Party that, ask yourself, where were you before Bernie Sanders? Where were these Bernie Sanders supporters before his run for the nomination? Were they engaged with the party, or did they just show up to join the bandwagon? For the people who showed up to join the bandwagon, why should the party cater to those types of people? So again, end of rant for now. Have a good whatever time it is.